Hi friends, in today's video I'm doing a watercolor brush review. These are black tulip mixed shapes watercolor brushes from Zen Arts. They were kind enough to send these to me and asked if I would have a look at them. I decided on my own to do a review, and so I wanted to see how they would compare to what I normally use. And because I thought it was a fun process, I decided to film it and share with you in case you are interested in this line of brushes as well. So this set comes with 6 brushes in a variety of shapes and sizes. They come really well packaged. Each one is individually wrapped, and there's a brush protector on the end for each of these. I find most of the brushes to be really well packed, and I did find just a little hair on one of these that was sticking out, so that's an easy fix. I'll show you. I'll just cut it off. You don't want to leave hairs like this if you ever find them on your brushes. They will get into your painting and just make unnecessary marks that you may not want. Alright, so I'll go ahead and get all of these unwrapped and ready to go, and then we'll take a look. Alright, so I found a second one that had a little hair sticking out, so it's not a big deal. Let's go ahead and take care of that. I have these tiny little scissors, and I'm just going to snip off the end as close to the base as possible without touching the other hairs. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is get these brushes wet and see if they hold their shape. So you can dip them into water and then just dab off the excess and see how well the wet bristles will hold. You can tell if it's a snappy brush, and if they're super soft, they'll kind of bend and stay folded over if you push them. But these ones are bouncing back and they're snapping back to shape, which is a good sign. That is what I like to see in my brushes. Okay, so it looks like there are 2 different flat brushes and then 2 different round brushes, different sizes. And then there's a liner brush and then a cat tongue brush. And that means it's got that triangle shape on the top. And then the liner brush really is for details or really fine, long lines. All right, so I'm using a cold press watercolor paper. It's 140 pound, and it is my go-to for loose florals, and so I'm going to be using this to do a little demonstration and a test with each of these brushes. I have my 2 jars of water, one warm, one cool, and I'm using my Quiller palette, which I did a setup of this palette. If you haven't seen it, I will link it with all my different colors listed if you're interested. Okay, so the first test is to test the different sizes of strokes. I've got really fine thin lines using just the edge of that brush, and then pushing down and onto the belly of the brush and doing a few more wider strokes. And so going from the thick to thin lines, you can really get an idea of how a brush will behave and if it snaps back into shape. These ones are doing really well, so I would be using this round brush for petals, leaves, and stems. It's usually a go-to brush for me. I always prefer the round brushes. They're the most flexible as far as different marks that you can make with one brush. I also noticed that these brushes are holding a good amount of water, so I don't have to re-dip as often with say a drier brush. This one is holding the water and paint pretty well. I'm getting really good mileage out of it. So let's go on and test the other ones. This is a flat brush, and then I'll also do the fine lines and the wide strokes and compare those. A flat brush is not really a go-to for me because it's just got those sharper angles, but you could do a really loose gestural painting with them. I think it might just be preference if you are somebody who likes to maybe do a little bit more squared off shapes, but you can still get points on your petal shapes, for example, if you just twist the angle of the brush. Generally, I use flat brushes for, say, backgrounds or some really squared off textures. There's some dust in my palette, and that is showing up in the paint. That is not the brush. So I just wanted to make that clear. I did not cover my palette, so it's probably got these little specks of dust, which I will have to go back and clean. So this cat tongue brush is a really interesting brush. It makes these points at the end when you just place down little marks. You can get some thin lines, but not as thin as with the round brush. But they would make some really pretty wide strokes. So you could do some big florals or big leaves, and it holds a lot of water and paint as well. Okay, and then for this liner brush, you can see that I can add in some really thin details. Once your, say, leaves are dry, you can go in and add veins, for example. It's really good for adding that wispy texture. You can still get a few wider strokes, but because it's a thin brush, you won't be able to have too much water and paint. It's really pretty thin and small, so I'm going to need to redip into my paint and water more often than with one of the larger brushes. All right, so that is a quick demonstration with all 6 brushes. I can now go ahead and we will do a loose floral and an actual artwork piece, which is always the best test. Um, so if you are following along, get your paper and brushes and paints. And I'll start with a little color palette that I would recommend. You can also, of course, edit and adjust as you wish and prefer. So going along with some of the test colors, I'm going to use this pinky rose color and a warmer orangey red. And then to contrast with that, maybe some cooler blues. So I'll test out a few examples here, and then we can add those in throughout the art piece too. If you have a really bright color, for example, that cyane blue, it's pretty vibrant. If you wanted to tone it down, you would either add a complementary color, like a touch of it, or you could even add in something like a Payne's gray and really take that saturation down and make it a little bit more of a, say, dirty, quote unquote, color, just so it's not so bright. If you wanted a more muted, sophisticated palette, for example. All right, so as always, starting really light to dark. You can always add more color after. Then you can, it's easier to add than take away. So I'm starting with the big florals. These are the pinky florals, and then I'll add in smaller little loose buds in that more orangey red color. I'm putting in all the florals first in a sort of a loose arrangement, and then I can go in and add a few stems here and there. Often when I do a loose composition like this, it's a lot of back and forth. So I'll do one layer of big loose florals and then add in some stems, then go back to the florals and kind of play with it a little bit and go back and forth. So that way you're always reassessing your composition and you can make decisions of what to add and when to add them and where to add them. All right, so after that muted gray color, I'm adding a little bit more of the brighter blues. And you can see that it gives a little bit more balance, having some that are muted and some that are bright pops of color. You don't want everything to be jumping off the page. If you want to have more of a balanced look, you'll have the brighter ones that will jump more into the foreground, and then the muted pieces will sort of fade more into the background. So you're getting a nice play with texture that way as well. So I'm going in with the liner brush now and adding some more fine, wispy little pieces to have a little contrast to the bolder marks. Once that first layer is a bit dry, you can go in and add some details and some darker saturated areas. So I'm going in and adding a few little dots and lines into the centers of the big florals. And I'm also going in and darkening up some shadows along some of the leaves and the petals. If you're interested in a full tutorial on how to make loose floral textures and shapes, including different leaf shapes and petal shapes, I will link those videos below. I have them on my channel, and that's more of a step-by-step, where this is just a quick, loose exercise to test out these brushes. Okay, and then finally going in and adding some filler pieces and last minute little details and touches. Overall, I really like these brushes. They performed really well, and I'm so happy that I was able to test them out. Thank you to Zen Art for sending them. If you're interested in checking them out yourself, I will put a link below in the description to their website and all the other fun watercolor supplies that they have to offer. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you had fun painting along. I'll see you in the next one.